Well, if you have been looking for the next great horror movie of 2025 since Sinners, I think that Together is that movie. So, welcome back to Reviews by Hunter. My name is Hunter. Let's get into what has become probably one of my favorite movies of the year. Like, not just horror, just overall favorite movie of 2025. This was great. I know that this movie released like 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I just got around to seeing it. But let's go ahead and dive into 2025's Together. So this movie was actually the directorial debut of Michael Shanks, starring Dave Franco, Alison Brie, and Damon Harriman. It was also produced by Dave Franco and Alison Brie and had a budget of 17 million. Horror film, R-rated, Together. I loved this movie, man. Like, almost everything about this. I've seen some really crappy horror movies this year. This was like a breath of fresh air. I think I kind of said the same thing about Weapons, but then this movie, I think, was better than Weapons, personally. So, a couple named Tim and Millie moved to the countryside in order to get a fresh start, but while experiencing challenges within their relationship, Tim drinks from a mysterious cave well while lost on a hiking trip. A supernatural force then begins to bind Tim and Millie together in the most horrific ways possible. As always, in my reviews, I do have spoilers. If you don't want spoilers, probably not the video for you. Just letting you know. So yeah, I loved the writing of this story. I loved the story. It's very character driven, and it shows the realism of what a relationship is actually like. So often in movies, I feel like couples aren't necessarily portrayed in a realistic way. But Dave Franco and Alison Brie, I feel obligated to say it, married in real life. Oh my God, it helps the chemistry so much in this movie. Chemistry, if there's an award for best chemistry between two leads, I think they win the award, man. I loved it. At times, they are shown loving each other. At times, they are shown resenting each other. At times, we see them joking with one another, or maybe giving each other passive-aggressive jabs. It just feels very real. It doesn't lean too far to the, oh my God, they're so in love and it's all perfect all the time. And it doesn't lean too far towards the, oh my God, they're this bitter couple that is so, like, distant from one another. It feels real, and I appreciate that, man. This movie also has great dialogue, and I felt like just this concept felt very fresh and very original. The only other movie I've seen that kind of reminds me of this film would be The Substance, because The Substance does have some similar body horror scenes. However, this is not a ripoff of The Substance. It's completely its own thing. And other than that movie, I've never seen anything like this, man. How often do you get to say, I have not seen anything like this? For me, almost ever. Outstanding, man. And the performance. The performances in this, like I said, Dave Franco, Alison Brie carry the movie. The other actor that I mentioned does a great job as well, but really, the driving force in this film is those two. They don't hold back. And I almost felt like this movie doesn't work without those two in the film. It's one of the best debuts for a director that I can think of in recent memory. The use of body horror is incredibly effective in almost every scene. In almost every scene where they're using the body horror, I felt like it had an impact on me, man. I felt like I was physically tensing up. I felt my body sort of almost like recoil or like cringe at certain scenes, man. I was invested in this. And I feel like the relationship drama that takes place throughout the film, it doesn't feel out of place. It doesn't feel like a B plot. It blends together really well with some of the comedic moments as well as the darker, tenser moments in this movie. And this movie feels very weird, but in the best way, and still somehow grounded within reality. The pacing, I'll admit, like Act 1 is probably the slowest part of the movie, but after that, the pacing is pretty dang consistent throughout the whole film, which I appreciate. Not too fast, not too slow. To me, it was just right. So let's get into it. Now, I'm trying to cut down the amount of minutes in these videos to give you a more concise, more well thought out review. So I will give you brief summaries of kind of Act 1, 2, and 3, and then tell you how I overall felt about this movie as a whole. So let's get into it. Again, spoilers. So Act 1 kind of opens up where we see already a little bit of a couple who is in love with each other, but they're not 100% in sync all of the time. Again, that's reality, man. How many couples can you think of right now that maybe that's the case, right? We actually see an interesting scene where they're at this party, and I forgot. Oh my god. Tim is the character played by Dave Franco. Millie is the character played by Alison Brie. Married in real life, and in this movie they are a couple until Millie proposes to Tim, and he is standing there like a deer in headlights, and it's not until there's this very awkward pause, very awkward silence, and sort of the pressure of everybody staring at them that Tim is, kind of reluctantly is like, oh yeah, I do. Tim is an aspiring musician, but he doesn't have a real job, and he does seem to have sort of like commitment or trust issues. And then Millie, I think, is kind of the more grounded character. She has big plans for them. That's why they're moving away, to sort of reconnect with each other and just take the next step at life. I mean, for God's sakes, we see her propose to Tim. She is ready for this next chapter of her life, and she's also an elementary school teacher. At the beginning of the movie, we also see some foreshadowing of what's going to happen in the film, where we see two dogs that are in this cave, and they both drink from this strange water. Shortly after drinking the water, we see these two dogs fuse into one another in a very deformed, gruesome looking way, man. It's very, again, effective use of horror, very uncomfortable to look at, and we see this through the lens of a search party, I believe, that comes across the two dogs. But yeah, so after Millie proposes to Tim, they kind of, again, have a little bit of not a fight, but again, you can see the tension between the couple. Act 1, again, probably the slowest part, but it's just the setup. It's showing us where our characters are kind of at in life, and the type of relationship and bond that they do have, which will be put to the test throughout this film. I didn't mind Act 1. Honestly, again, within the first 5 minutes, I don't know if I said that already, but within the first 5 minutes, you can tell, like, oh, Dave Franco and Alison Brie, like, they're about to have a performance, which they do. Act 2 is where we kind of start seeing more of the actual body horror stuff take place. I believe it is in Act 2 where it might have been late Act 1, but Tim and Millie go on a hike and they get lost. Neither of them has any service, and they don't know how to use a compass. Tim sees like all these bells that lead down this path, so he thinks it's marked. So him and Millie go down this path. It's raining, it's late, they don't know where they are, and they fall into like, I don't know if it would be called a sinkhole, but they fall underground. And they decide that they're gonna wait out the storm before they're able to climb out. And they realize, oh my god, like, we don't have any more water. Tim, I think, is the one that finds this weird well. Again, looks ominous, looks like the type of water, stagnant water that you wouldn't want to drink out of because you don't know what it is, but he does, right? And it turns out that water is supernatural. There's something in that water that is sort of the catalyst for this intense bonding, really binding, that begins to take place. And I like the way they did it, because Millie doesn't drink from the water. Only Tim did. So at first, he's the only one who starts experiencing this weird feeling of being kind of magnetically pulled towards Millie. Almost this undescribable feeling where he has to be near her. And if he's away from her, it's almost it is painful. We also learned that there was another couple who lived in the same area as Tim and Millie who went missing. Again, a little bit of foreshadowing there. And so what this is it's like this supernatural like binding. I think we first see it where when they sleep in that cave, they wake up and their legs, the skin of their legs is attached to each other, and they're like, what are you doing? Like, stop doing that. But what it is they're literally getting stuck together. This is just the beginning, and even the beginning stages, tearing apart, is painful. There's a lot of like metaphors for like codependency that you can see in this film, and also I think being in a toxic relationship. You see throughout the movie that when they are together, it is when they're getting binded together, it's painful, but also separating from each other causes like more pain. It's interesting, but anyway, I digress. We kind of see their relationship start to get more rocky in this act. Tim is the one that really starts to become more codependent on Millie because he's being like magnetically drawn to her, and that's actually an issue that they have within the relationship. Is that Tim is consistently turning down opportunities to be intimate with Millie. Like, she'll even initiate and he'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry, like, I have to stay up late and like finish this work, right? For whatever reason, Tim is like not all in on Millie until he drinks this water. And then at one point in the movie when Millie is driving to work, you probably might have seen this in the trailers, Tim is like drawn to her. Wherever she goes, he's literally like being pulled that way. And he's almost like in a how could you describe it? Like a spell-like state. Like he almost becomes unconscious for a second. He's in this primal need of desperation to be closer to Millie. Throughout this, I was just very tense, very much like on the edge of my seat. We have some really crazy scenes here. I wrote some standout scenes that I felt happened in this movie, and one of them was Tim is literally like, he's like in a sweat. He looks like he's pale, like he's sick because he's apart from Millie. So he follows her to her job when he was supposed to leave at the train station to go catch a gig. Instead, he leaves all of his his instruments, everything, and on foot goes and finds Millie's school. Where she looks out the window and sees Tim and is like, what the hell is going on? So then we get a scene where Tim is like, oh my god, I want you so bad. And they have intimacy in the boys' bathroom of Millie's school, because when she sees him, she kind of just rushes him into the closest spot that she can find, and that happens to be the boys' bathroom. So, once again, I saw something I'd never seen before. When they are done having intimacy, Tim tries to release himself from Millie and is unable to. He is stuck within her. Their skin has attached to each other in that way, and they actually do have a scene where they show the shaft of Tim attempting to pull out of Millie, and he just can't. Eventually, Millie is like, okay, I'm sorry, and forcefully detaches herself from Tim, and she starts bleeding. And so when Jamie, who is the other character in this movie, he's also a school teacher who sort of introduces himself to Millie, a boy went and told him that, hey, there's two adults in here, but she's bleeding from her leg, and so he just thinks that it was her time of the month. That dude, I've never seen something like that. I have never seen something like that. It was like watching it in the theater, man. It was disturbing, bro. Like it's that same feeling like if you ever see a video of someone getting like kicked in the nuts, seeing them forcefully, not forcefully, but they are binded together in that way. I was like reeling, man. That was crazy. Again, there's some really creative use of horror in this film. At one point, finally, I don't know if it was Act 2 or Act 3, but Millie finally believes Tim that, hey, something is off here, something is wrong, something is making me, like, bound to you. It makes me want to bind to you. And once Millie kind of she realizes that that's happening, that's when I think some of the crazier stuff starts to happen. We see a scene where their arms start to fuse together. Like, you can see their fingers pulsing inside of someone else's arm. Dude, that's the best way I can describe it, man. It's like they're morphing together, but you can see all the little individual parts like pulsing within each other. They are in the process of becoming one fused being. It's creepy, bro. It is so creepy, but it looks good. It looks great. It doesn't look cheesy or cheaply made. It looks awesome, man. There's a scene right there that I used for my background where they're kissing and Millie gets pissed off because she thinks Tim bit her, but it's just their lips started to fuse together, man. Everything you can think of, like all the sorts of different body parts in this film get binded together. There's also a scene that was in the trailer where, and this is actually where their arms, I think, were fused into each other, that Millie decides, I'm going to saw through it. And I from what I remember, like that scene probably could have been like a little bit more graphic, but I think they got the point across pretty well, all things considered. And then Act 3, so this is really where, again, they're trying to figure out what are they going to do. Is it better to try and stay separated from each other? However, when they do, it's painful for the both of them, and the magnetic pull almost seems to be stronger. We see scenes where they're literally bending. Like, there was one scene where Millie's legs like go over the top of her head, and she's rolling towards Tim, and he's also getting pulled, like dragged on the ground towards her. Like, they are becoming inseparable. That is the process in which they are getting into. So Tim actually discovers a couple, that couple that I mentioned that had gone missing. Turns out they are survivors of this process, whatever you want to call it, and they are extremely grotesquely deformed and fused together. They look like a monstrosity. This is where it reminded me of The Substance. What was it? Monstro Eliza or something like that? It kind of reminded me of that. However, you have this fused couple begging for help. I took it as them begging for death. And Tim doesn't do it. He just runs away and escapes the cave to go tell Millie what he had just seen. Millie, on the other hand, she discovers that Jamie isn't just Jamie, the well-mannered school teacher. Jamie is a survivor of the fusion. He had a partner who was also a man that he fused with, and so they're actually one being. Jamie, I believe, used to be two separate beings, and they're a part of this cult that believes that, like, we are supposed to actually be a being with two arms, two legs, and two faces, like a being of perfect harmony. But at some point, we got separated from our bodies. I forgot the exact reason why, but then we were like cursed to try and find our other half for the rest of the rest of our lives. Okay, and so he actually slits the wrist of Millie because he says that this will help the fusion, and that this isn't a curse, it's a gift. And so she runs back to tell Tim what she just discovered. So they both know at this point, oh crap, like they are pretty much destined to morph together. The question is, do they give in to becoming just one entity, one being, or do they keep trying to be singular, different people with their own identity, and try to survive on their own, right? You know, it's possible that if they would have kept their distance, maybe they moved to a different city, I don't know, that they would survive. Although I don't know if that would work, because again, when they're apart, they seem to like, it seems to be a violent reaction within their body. So Tim is ready to sacrifice himself. He has a knife up to his throat, but decides that, he was going to go through with it until he realizes that Millie is bleeding out. And so they both decide, you know what, we're done fighting this. We both love each other. And you know what, the only way to survive this is to morph into each other and become one being, to be inseparable. And we have this scene where they're like slow dancing to the Spice Girls because that was Millie's favorite album when they first met. And then yeah, that's a lot of people didn't like the ending from what I've seen. I will say this. This is the ending. This is the ending of the movie. We see Millie's parents, who we are told at one point in the film were coming to visit. So at the very end, they finally come to visit. They knock on the door. Takes a while, but we see the door open, and it is a perfectly fused version of Tim and Millie, and they look like this. They look like a normal person, but they look androgynous, and they're supposed to have, I guess, features of both Tim and Millie. But this ritual or process has successfully happened for Tim and Millie, whereas it didn't for the couple that Tim came across back in the cave. That my guess is maybe they fought the process, or one of them did maybe kill themselves, and so it was an unsuccessful ritual, and so they turn into this grotesque monster. And that was really my summaries of Acts 1, 2, and 3. But I love this movie. There was another scene in the film that I forgot to mention, one of the creepiest things I think I've ever seen, where they are both in bed at one point at night, and Millie is like, hey, can you stop pulling on my hair? Get off my hair. And she's like, Tim. And then she turns the light on, and it's Tim, who is like, again, he's having one of those like unconscious episodes, and he has a significant amount of Millie's hair like down his throat, and he's choking on it, and she's trying to yank it out. Dude, that was not only a good jump scare, but again, I've never seen anything like that in a horror film. That was freaking awesome while being gross at the same time, man. It was crazy, bro. And that was also one of the parts of the movie where Millie is still kind of in denial that something else is going on. She just thinks that Tim is like starting to become weird and obsessive, and maybe he's not the man that she thought he was. It's just so good. I love everything about this movie. I'm getting way too excited talking about it. I'm like kind of forgetting, some of the things I wanted to say here. Some other standout moments I saw was actually no, I actually covered that. That was, like I said, there was so many horror moments in the film where I was like, dude, this is original, and it's fun. It's gross, but not to the point where like I can't look. Like I said, I didn't like the cannibalistic type of stuff and Bring Her Back, but this was just good horror, entertaining. I was tense, and I just can't stop thinking about this movie, man. This was great. This was really, really great. One of the best movies I've seen in 2025, and with a budget of $17 million again, and for a debut from Michael Shanks. I'm excited to see what else he does, because this is a great start. Great start. This will make my top 10 movies of the year. It was so interesting seeing I was trying to figure out what the movie was trying to say, because I know it's covering sort of codependency and maybe being in a toxic relationship, right? When you're in a toxic relationship, it's so hard to leave that person a lot of times, no matter what end of it that you're on, whether you're the person that needs to let go or you're the person that maybe needs to be let go of. Either way. And this movie kind of covers that, but then it turns it into in its most realistic sense of the word, of being inseparable, right? Two people that you're like, maybe you two don't really need to be in a relationship anymore, but they just keep going back to each other. But in this sense, they are drawn to each other. And I just loved it, man. I know I've said that about 50 times, so that's probably my sign that this review needs to end. But if you've seen this movie, is there anything that I left out, anything that I didn't cover? I did my best to kind of cover the main plot points and cover the main, points of the story. But like I said, this is one that I'm excited to watch again. I just looked it up before making this video. Again, budget of $17 million. Worldwide has grossed about $20 million. I don't know where exactly this movie will end up maybe within the next couple of weeks. But I hope it makes more money because I want whoever worked on this film, Michael Shanks, Dave Franco, Alison Brie, to get their money, man. Damon Harriman, because they made a banger of a horror film. But that's really all I got for you guys. This was great. Chemistry, off the charts. Writing, dialogue, awesome. Horror, effective. If you haven't noticed, I don't have much negative things to say about this movie. If I had to nitpick, like I said, to me the pacing was consistent, but I do know that some people are gonna feel like it drags a little bit in between dialogue and something actually happening. At first, out of theater, I gave it an 8 out of 10. But dude, I haven't been able to stop thinking about this film, and even just talking about it now, I'm like, dude, this was great. And so I really think I'm gonna change my rating from an 8 out of 10. I'm gonna give this film a 9 out of 10. I loved it. And that is the second highest rating, at least for me, on this channel, other than Sinners. That's spectacular. But together, 2025. What did you guys think? Leave a comment. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you enjoy this type of content. Thank you all.